All right, Chris Speaks back here today with Brandon Moseley for our BCS State of Alabama podcast, and we got Democratic independent candidate, gubernatorial candidate with the state,
He's an
Robert Mardis.
independent.
Yes, sir.
What
Independent.
I said Democratic independent.
Yeah,
Sorry,
he's an
independent.
independent.
I know they usually
Independent.
caucus together, but I'm going with the independent route.
Well, that gives me an interesting question to start off with. As an independent, where do you think your political leanings are? Are they more right, left, center?
I'm progressively conservative. So being born in Alabama, you have those conservative values, but being born as a millennial, I have those progressive ideals as well. But I'm more of a what does the situation calls for? I believe that you have to have progressives as the gas and conservatives as the brakes. In order for the car to move effectively, you need both to operate in tandem and not one trying to shadow the other. Because sometimes you have a straightaway, you can floor it, but sometimes you're going around the curve. So I'm more of a what does this situation cause for? Does it cause for us to be more progressive or be more conservative?
Uh, Robert, you're running as independent. I think that means you need like 43,000. I'm not sure about the exact number.
You're close.
Ballot signatures of registered Alabama voters to sign for you to be on the ballot.
Correct.
Um, how much is it going to cost to get that many ballot signatures together? Assuming you have to pay people to do that.
See, that's part of the beauty of it. Grassroots movements with volunteer efforts of people who. So if you look at this state, 62% of this state doesn't vote, and majority of those folks are in the same boat that I'm in. We're tired of the constant back and forth between Democrats and Republicans, simply looking to gain seats as opposed to governing. So when you listed a group of volunteers, it tends to go by a little faster. Now we're still roughly around 28,000 signatures short from being on the ballot. But yeah, as long as we can continue getting more people to volunteer, and we have a few more months before we have to turn those in. So if we can get a few more folks to come on and volunteer, and it's just something as simple as you getting a petition ballot and you taking it to your church with you or your job with you, and just get folks to sign it. And it's not saying that you're going to vote for me. It's just saying we want to get him on the ballot so we can at least hear what his policies are to see if we want to vote for him and want to let him lead this state.
Well, that describing as a progressive conservative, that was pretty interesting. I've never heard that before. Can you give me an example on an issue that you think we should be progressive on as opposed to one we should be conservative on?
Yeah, so I think most that's so mean. I'm trying to see what's a good one that we can be progressive. So I think when you come look at so I'll give you a perfect example of something that can be a mixture of being progressive and conservative. So when you look at the whole so first of all, let me say this. I 100% support the LGBTQ plus community's rights to live, laugh, to love, all that it means to be human. But when we look at it from a progressively conservative standpoint with the sports and bathrooms, for example, my common sense solution would just be, if you're XXXY, you use this bathroom, and then you have a separate bathroom for the all-inclusive bathroom for anybody that wants to use it. So the half of the country that wants to keep the bathroom separate for XYXX, you get that. For the folks who want to have the all-inclusive bathrooms, you get those as well. So my approach is always trying to find a compromise in the middle. The same thing with sports. We didn't want to exclude people who had disabilities or mental impairments, so we created the Special Olympics. We didn't put them all on the same courts in the same fields. We don't want to exclude anybody, but we have to hold some realities in place. And doing the physical differences between men and women, I think with sports, for example, they have to be a little separate, but you can have that XXXY and then the all-inclusive league. That means that's anybody who believe that there's no physical difference in men and women, that there's no disadvantages or advantages in sports. You can still participate in sports, but we don't take the opportunities away from women to have to compete against, males. So I think that's something that you can say is progressively conservative. You take parts of the progressive ideology of everybody should be accepted, which I believe, but then you take parts of the conservative ideology that says, well, no, there is a difference. So there are some barriers that we do have to safeguards that we have to put in place.
Have you taken into account how much it would cost the school systems to install a third set of bathrooms for the boys who want to be girls and the girls who want to be boys? They can share a bathroom, I guess. And for starting a third sports league, like, we have women's basketball and men's basketball. And I guess this would be whoever doesn't want to play for the men's team or the women's team or doesn't qualify or whatever. I mean, this seems like a lot of upfront costs to me.
Mhm. So there's always going to be a cost associated with any new program that you try to implement. But I look at it from what is the end goal? What is the what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to be more inclusive because the reality of it is that all of us are going to be here. None of us is going to leave this state of Alabama, for example. We're living here, so we have to find a way. How do we coexist with one another? That you have rights, but your rights aren't infringing on other people's rights. So when it comes to the cost. It will be a cost, but is the cost of not allowing sports across a broad spectrum more costly? And the reason I say that is this. So I played sports from little league all the way through high school, and one of the biggest things that I take away from sports isn't the actual game itself. It's the life lessons. It's the camaraderie of working in a unit. So it builds these types of character traits so that when you do step out into the regular world, you can be more productive member just based off philosophies that come from sports. So I'm a strong advocate of allowing multiple young folks to have the opportunities to participate in sports programs. But yeah, of course, the startup costs will be there, but we have to figure out how do we get those revenues generated, and that's why some of the other things that we're eventually going to talk about will prove though how we will get the revenues generated to make sure that we can do these things. But as far as the restrooms go, we're not talking about the very next day we sign the bill that you have to implement these restrooms. We're talking about, at least 10, you give you a 10-year window because it is construction costs. It is a lot of money that will have to be implemented, but you have to look at it is the long-term uh, benefits greater. So what I mean is, are we going to continue to go down this back and forth road of should men go to this bathroom? Should women go to this bathroom? Or should men play in this sport? Should women play in this sports? When we can just solve the problem and move on to stuff that actually matters. So one of the things that I'm talking about that actually matters is how do we increase the quality of life for the up and coming generations when we're looking at $38 trillion in debt? When we're looking at the average first time home buyer's age is 38, and we're talking about 50-year mortgages. So I'm saying let's get this problem off the table that we're constantly being bogged down in Congress about. It may cost us a little bit of money, but in the long run, we can start to focus our concerns on the issues that matter the most, such as is my generation going to actually be able to retire? I mean, with a 50-year mortgage, you're 88 years old by the time you finish paying that off. You're talking about a $38 trillion in debt. Who's going to be responsible for paying that? That debt's not just going to disappear. It's going to be my generation that's going to be on the hook for that debt. So we have to step up and make sure we're addressing real issues now and not just social issues that are emotionally appealing to people.
I got one more question for you on this. I mean, should we really be looking at changing society for 0.44% of the population?
And that's where I'm getting to. It's not about changing society. I go back to the Special Olympics, right? We knew that those kids could not perform on the same courts and fields with the other children. So we took the opportunity to create something for them. It's a very small percentage of them as well. But we want to make sure we're as inclusive as we can for humanity's sake, to actually working together. So I don't believe that you conform to the whims of the 1% by any means. And this is one of those things that I'm saying that we can do that is kind of an in between. We're not capitulating to the far left, far right, or anything. We're saying, hey, we're all human. We all want to participate in sports. We all have to relieve ourselves. But there's a manner in which we have to do it. Because I don't want my little girl going into the men's locker room. I'm sorry if anybody takes offense to that, but I don't want my little girl in there. But for those people who feel as though there is no difference, we can accommodate.
I hate to keep beating on the same topic, but Alabama's already passed legislation
Mhm.
that basically would prevent a boy from transitioning to girlhood or girl transitioning to a boy, as a minor. So is
And I
this
agree.
even something that's necessary since, there aren't little girls that are popping, testosterone in such quantities that she's got a bigger beard than you do. Uh, you know,
I'm sorry.
there's just no law, but, and President Trump has made this illegal too, nationally. So who are we even talking about now?
So I'm speaking more specifically to the adults. So I'm one of those folks who I don't agree with the quote unquote gender affirming care. I don't think children make the best decisions. I remember the Andy Griffin show, and he was giving a lesson about to Hopi about you don't give kids the first shiny thing you don't present something shiny to a kid because they'll grab at the first shiny thing that they see. So what that means is I understand that there are trans people, there are gay people, but I think children are too young to make those lifelong decisions because we have these things called coming out now about detransitioners. Now we can't talk much about that because obviously folks want to act like that doesn't exist, but there are these detransitioners, and we have to think about the long-term harm that we're doing to a kid who, for all intents and purposes, just stopped believing in Santa Claus last year. So I don't think in those cases that the kids should be able to medically transition. But once you're 18, if you want to, that's on you. I truly believe that we should have the freedoms to do whatever we want to do as long as we don't cause harm or our actions come at the unreasonable expense of other people. So trans adults, live your best life. Trans kids, allow their brains to develop a little bit more to see what they actually want to be. Um, because at the end of the day, I think it's an adult's job to protect the children, even if it is from themselves.
So, Robert, what do you think is the number one issue facing the state of Alabama right now?
So not even just the state of Alabama, but the number one issue facing the United States as a whole is America is no longer innovators. So what I mean is this: we used to want to lead in every single new industry, technology. We wanted to dominate it, but now we're taking a step back from innovators. So when you look around the world, most people are investing into these new technologies to build. So we're not creating the economy that we're going to need to build for the future generation. So, for example, the Industrial Revolution created the middle class for millions of Americans. How do we replicate that again? That's the renewable energies and the technological industries will be the millennials and Gen Z's industrial revolution. We have to invest into these industries because these are going to be the next major sectors of power of who can harness these. We control oil now, but at the same time, we know that's a finite resource. We have to start investing into the technologies that are going to be the economical engines of the future now. So if we don't do these things, there isn't going to be an American dream. But the biggest caveat that I want to take that I think is driving America or government itself is this constant Democrat versus Republicans. Until we can end this unnecessary I'm trying to make your party look bad to make my party look good. I'm going to tear down your policies just because I'm not a part of your party. Those are the things that are killing our country. We can't work together on common sense solutions because it seems like it's more important for us to win an election than to actually do policies that will work. If I as a black man say that I agree with some things that has done, I'm looked at as really, wow, you think that? Well, I give credit where credit's due. I think we have to bring those aspects of politics back to where it's not so hyper fixated on what my party has presented because we're seeming like we're doing 4 or 8 years of this Republican president, then we come back and do another 4 of 8 years of this Democratic president. And all it is, I'm going to tear down everything you did to make my party look good. And I'm going to come back in and tear down everything you did to make my party look good. And it's just a back and forth of we're sabotaging the other party to make ourselves look good instead of actually governing. I think that's one of the major issues.
Robert, um, Loretta Lynch started an investigation of the Alabama prison system. Jeff Sessions, as AG for Trump, presented the report claiming that that a term in the Alabama prison system was a inhumane punishment, banned by the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. We were sued by President Trump's, I think his second or third AG, Robert Barr. And, that lawsuit was continued under Joe Biden. And now here we are back in the second Trump administration, and we're still facing the same federal lawsuit. How would Robert, as governor, address the prison conditions that apparently are so bad that both Republicans and Democrats in DC are united on that our prison system is the worst on the continent?
Okay. So the first thing is we have to focus more on redemption. It can't be a system that is solely based off of let's throw you in a hole for 15, 20 years and now you're gone. And we do have to remember that these are living human beings. I think you should be punished for certain crimes that you commit because I don't think that you should allow a murderer to walk around freely with the rest of us in society. However, we make mistakes sometimes, and sometimes people are innocent in prison, so we do have to keep the humane aspect of it. But I think the biggest step to, as far as prisons go, is we have to stop creating laws just to criminalize citizens to fill the prison complex. So let's look at the prisons that they just built. Then, right after the prisons that they built, they came up with House Bill 445, the marijuana bill. So you're literally took taxpayers' dollars to build a prison, then created a law to turn taxpayers into criminals. Because there's no way you should get caught with a vape pen and that's a felony that's on your record for the rest of your life. And as far as the living conditions go, again, we've built some new prisons, so I think that in itself will mitigate some of those problems. But I do think we have to put more of an emphasis on rehabilitating people and not throwing people in prison and just saying, "Hey, sit there, you." And that's that. We have to figure out how do we treat people humanely, regardless of if they've made mistakes. Now, I'm all about punishment. I'm all about making sure we keep society safe. I'm not one of those people who think that we should defund the police. I'm not one of those folks who think that immigration should just be wide open borders. I believe that there has to be order amongst the chaos.
Or speak along those same lines. Do you think it's time that we decriminalize marijuana and start attacking it?
So I think you can control that from seed to sale. With the viable land that we have specifically in the Black Belt, if you were to start it from seed to sale and can regulate it the same way we do the ABC store, that generates billions of dollars in revenue for this state. And that gives us the money to invest into making sure we can produce sports programs for everybody, to make sure we can fix our crumbling infrastructure, to make sure that we can invest into our roads and our education and actually provide a better quality of life for people in Alabama. I mean, for me, this isn't about vice, it's about vision. So when I talk about legalizing the lottery, legalizing marijuana, and legalizing sports betting, it is one of those things that we're not stopping Alabamians from doing it. We're just sending our money to different states. So when you look at the amount of money that Mississippi has brought in from their lottery, they were able to cut their state income tax. We can do things similar to that if we stop trying to reinvent the wheel and look around the country, see what works for other states similar to us and see what the cause and effects were, and just implement those things. If it works in a state similar like Mississippi, to where if they implemented, and their governor at the time said he wasn't a fan of the lottery, but he knew that it would generate revenue. And now they don't pay state income tax. We can take these steps here in Alabama. We just have to have visionary leaders who understand that if you don't want to gamble, you're not going to go gamble. I personally don't play the lottery just because, I mean, you know, probably not going to win it. But
Yeah,
at
the
the
odds are
same time,
200 million to one.
so, but
I
for
could
me,
use the 1.5 billion, but I'm not
definitely.
going to get it, so I'm not going to spend $100 on lottery tickets.
Pretty much. And so I guess I look at it more. So a lot of folks' argument is that it's a poor man's tax. So my counter is we're already paying an involuntary tax. So if I go get a job and I work for you, you're already taking taxes out of my check. But at least with the poor man's check, quote unquote poor man's tax, I have a choice whether or not I go spend this money over here. Nobody's forcing me to go buy a lottery ticket or go gamble. Um, so let people make their own decisions. We're all adults, and I think we should teach financial literacy starting in kindergarten through grade school, so that way you can make better choices. But I do understand that gambling is an addiction, so we would use some of those revenues to make sure we're putting addiction recovery programs in place just to be on the safe side of folks who may fall into that.
I've covered various gambling bills in the Alabama legislature now for like 15 years. And, outside of Montgomery, everybody's talking about, are you for gambling? Are you not for gambling? Actually, in the legislature, that's not what they're talking about. They're always talking about how many casinos and which counties get casinos and what exactly are those casinos allowed to do.
Mhm.
If Robert Mardis is governor and he is proposing his gambling bill to the legislature, are we talking about 20 casinos, 10 casinos, limiting it to just the quasi casinos we have now, or completely rethinking this whole deal?
So I think you have to have a combination of kind of all of that. You have to look at strategically where can you place these casinos that will generate enough revenue to be worth building these casinos. But I think we have enough counties in this state to where we can spread them out far enough to where they're accessible. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the whole state as a whole is benefiting from these additional revenues, not just the county that it is in. And I'm one of those people that will want to sit down with a couple of people, some developers, economists, et cetera, to figure out the best strategic goals to actually implement this. As far as my understanding of it, there I have my eyes on a few different counties just because the population size of that county. So obviously, the bigger counties would definitely get them, but we can create casinos in various counties in this state to generate the necessary revenue.
Robert, I'm going back to the marijuana thing again. We just seen President Trump reclass it a few days ago. Do you think that we're close to seeing legalization of marijuana nationwide?
Yes, and the reason being is now when we say close, how close are we talking? Because I'm thinking around more so of a decade.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I'm thinking, something like that.
yeah, so then in that case, I would say yes, but any with the next election cycle, no. But I do strongly advocate for the legalization of marijuana. I also strongly advocate for us creating plans to help with drug addiction, as opposed to just completely criminalizing it. There are a ton of people. I think we all have people in our families or know someone in our families that have fell prey to drugs. It is a problem. It's not that you're a bad person, but they are a drain on society, and we all know the types of things that can come out of some of these hardcore drugs and some of the acts that go behind it. So I think we got to focus on first, how do we prevent folks from doing it from a psychological standpoint? And I think most of it comes down to a lot of people just feel hopeless. So I think if you can create a society that isn't just looking at drug users as, are you a criminal? We're going to throw you in the county jail for 30 days. And when you get back out, you're doing the same thing. We want to find ways to make sure that you have the opportunity to clean yourself up. Now, everybody's not going to take advantage of that. Everybody's not going to want to get clean, but we have to give people the opportunity instead of just criminalizing people.
I recently interviewed Steve Marshall, and he told me that he was on pace, to be the attorney general who executed the most people in the state of Alabama. Um, we've been pretty, compared to the rest of the nation, other than Texas, pretty aggressive with the death penalty. Of course, we had a
Mhm.
bunch of people on death row that had been sitting there for decades, and we're kind of working through that. Are you comfortable with executing, a few dozen people in the next 8 years as governor, or do you think we need to rethink some of this?
So when it comes to the death penalty, I'm one of those folks who, uh, let's just say you walk inside of an elementary school and you shoot it up, or you walk inside of a church and you shoot it up, or a nightclub and you shoot it up. I'm in favor of the death penalty in situations like that. But when you're convicted solely off of evidence, because we do make mistakes, that's when I have questions about the death penalty, because we've had so many times where people were in prison for X amount of years, but come to find out they actually didn't do it. The reason why I would be in favor of it in something like, we see you committed this mass shooting in this elementary school. There is no question about whether it was you. We have 37 people with 37 different cell phone angles. We know it was you. But when we're talking about you're on death row because you were convicted off of evidence, I wouldn't want to just execute you, because we may find out 10 years after we execute you that no, you actually didn't do it. But to simplify your question, in some situations, I am 100% on board with the death penalty. I think some crimes are that heinous. But if it's just circumstantial evidence and you're convicted by a jury, I think we have to take into account of human error before we make that ultimate decision of executing someone.
Over here a few weeks ago, attorney candidate for Attorney General Pamela Casey, she convicted a guy I went to high school with for molesting a 9-year-old child. He got life without. Do you think we should enact the death penalty for these type of offenders who attack our children like that?
That's one of those gray areas that the man in me says yes. The public service in me says no. And what I mean is this: as much as I don't understand how you can be attracted to children, first and foremost. But again, going back to my previous statements, I think that us as adults, we have to protect our children. And I think that he should get the life in sentence, that should be no question. But I do think that we have to start looking at the age of the child, and obviously the younger the child, then yeah, like I would be in fan of, okay, yeah, maybe we should castrate you. I'm sorry. Um, I know a lot. It may not be popular with a lot of people, but at the end of the day, I think we have to protect our children, and that there's no room in our society for you to, harm innocent children just because you can't control yourself.
Um, let's imagine for a minute that Brandon is a brilliant, investor, capitalist dude with millions of dollars, and he's about to start a startup company. If I start my startup in Alabama, I'm going to pay 5% income tax on my company and, on whatever I pay myself and my people. I can go and start that company in Georgia, and I think I'm paying like 3.25, 3.5% income
Hmm.
tax. If I go to Tennessee, it's zero. If I go to Florida, it's zero. How would Robert, as governor, tell that cool venture capitalist guy who's going to start the next great company that he needs to do it in Alabama, even though we're going to take a lot more of his money than he would in any other southern state?
That's because, as governor of Alabama, Robert Mardis, the first thing we'll do is to generate the additional revenues to. So if you look at these other states, why are they able to reduce their taxes in so many other areas? It's because they generate enough revenue. So if Alabama would again legalize marijuana, legalize gaming, and legalize the lottery, that generates the billions in revenue to where you can start to cut these taxes for businesses so that you can become just as attractive as other states. Alabama's only going to continue to shoot itself in the foot if we don't invest into making sound decisions and generating the revenue so that we can be competitive with other states. And when you look at places like Birmingham, Alabama, we were supposed to get the Atlanta airport at one point in time, but we didn't get it. We're supposed to get a lot of things here in Alabama that we're losing out on because of our failed leadership. And this is what I'm trying to bring to the table so that every business person know that there's a new governor at the helm. We're going to make the necessary adjustments to be competitive with every other state, and not just competitive, but we can supersede every other state. Because if you look at Alabama as a whole, we're the most geographically diverse state in this country. So that means every geographical topography, we have it here. So whether you need fresh soil or you need an industrialized cities or you need et cetera, to facilitate that business, we have it here. With our access to the coast and the ports, we can be a hub for businesses if Alabama gets leadership that doesn't turn away businesses just because you want to tax everybody to death instead of implementing revenue generating industries that other states obviously are capitalizing on. I mean, you can't compete with other states if I, as a businessman. If I have the opportunity to pay 5% taxes or zero, bless you, or 5% taxes, I'm going to choose the zero. So we have to put Alabama in a position to where we can actually be competitive, and that starts with generating revenue so that we don't have to be so tax burden heavy.
Keeping on the same lines while ago, we was talking about crime. Do you think that President Trump is right when he's called the National Guard into these cities?
So when it comes to the president of the United States protecting the citizens of said cities, I agree. I know that's an unpopular opinion, especially among certain groups of people, but at the same time, how long do you allow your city to be destroyed before you fix it? And this is why I said in the beginning, I'm not a fan of defunding the police. You know, we have an extreme crime problem in a lot of our inner cities. Why should we sit back and watch it deteriorate when we can employ a mechanism that can stop it? Now, me personally, I don't think President Trump should have had to do it. I think the governors and the mayors of these cities and these states should have taken it on themselves to clean up their own cities. But I do commend President Trump for sending in the National Guard to make it safer.
Robert, this past legislature approved, I think, $160 million of education dollars to follow children to private schools and to homeschools. And in this next session, we're probably going to increase that number further. Are you okay with education dollars leaving the public schools
No,
and following the children to wherever the children go?
no. Uh, I, I think everybody should have the opportunity to a quality education. And I do think we need to make improvements in our public education system. And I do commend Kay Ivey and this current administration because I give credit where credit is due. You have seen an uptick in some of our educational standards. So we have to continue to expand on those. But I don't believe that you take money out of the public schools and shift them over to the students who are going to private schools or home schools for this reason. How many people are actually going to private school versus public school? So you're taking money away from our public schools, and now you're going to have more people who don't have a quality education versus a handful that may get a fuller education. I think we have to revamp our public education, and one of those things is my AI and task innovation. So what that means is we have to prepare these kids for the future generations of jobs and how do you survive outside of school, not just simply how do you take a test. One of my core issues, not issues, but one of my core policies with education will be a my classroom economy type program where you start in kindergarten, you get a monopoly money, you pay rent on your desk. By the time you get to high school, you start paying a mortgage on your debt. So it basically just teaches you a lot finance 101 from a economical standpoint on how to survive as an adult. So again, I wouldn't want to take those additional funds out because I will need those to implement a stronger program such as that.
Or you mentioned AI. I mean, is there a way that we can look in the state at the state level to create jobs through that? Because it seems like that's going to be the future of where our jobs are at.
Yeah, so we actually already have a commission that has conducted studies on AI and automation in the workplace, et cetera, et cetera. So for me specifically, we're that's where we're headed, and this is why I back to again where I said that this is the next revolution. So the way the Industrial Revolution catapulted millions of Alabamians and Americans into the middle class, this is what the AI and technological and renewable energies industries are going to do for my generation. It's kind of like you think about before we got electricity, we used candles in homes. People protested, we candles are great. But now we have electricity. You couldn't convince somebody to light their homes with candles. And this is what the renewable energies and the AI industries are. They're at that infant stage to where people are kind of skeptical about it. But at the same time, this is where the world is heading. This is what I mean by we have to become innovators again. Because if we don't, if America doesn't lead in those, we won't lead the world. And my generation will lose that sight of that American dream. But as far as it comes to AI and automation in our jobs, part of my task force will be to provide incentives for businesses who retrain their employees versus just replacing them. Because even though automation does make it more convenient, because I can order this package online today and get it tomorrow because of automation, you still have to think about the people who are relying on those jobs to feed themselves and their families. And I think people come before profits because if you're so profit driven that you shun out the people, your business will eventually collapse.
Robert, 50 years ago, Alabama was primarily agriculture. We had dairies, uh,
Peanuts.
small farmers growing squash and watermelons and all kinds of, pretty much anything that you could eat was grown on a farm in Alabama.
Hmm.
Since then, most of our farms have shut down. The state is 72% forested, which is like the highest percentage, certainly in the Southeast. And now we import our milk comes from Wisconsin. Our lamb comes from Australia. When we eat a tomato, it's probably from Florida or Mexico. Does Alabama need to look at becoming food self-sufficient, both economically, so we can put some people back to work?
I'm glad you asked that. That is actually part of our rural Alabama revitalization initiatives, is to invest into our farmlands and to provide grants for farmers in these. Now, we won't just do it in the Black Belt. We're going to start there just because of the land that we have there, the fertilization of the soil. So when we have those things, I think, like you said, 50 years ago, we formed all of these things. And that is, if you look on my on Facebook, you will see the full details of that plan of how we provide grants to ensure that we're building our own food source, our own food processes. So the number of jobs that creates, the number of cutting down the cost from having to import all of these different food items into it, it cuts down our cost. And we will, under my leadership, what I need most people to understand is under my leadership, I'm looking at the bigger picture. I'm looking at how do we create sustainability for decades, not just how do we survive in this moment, but how do we, excuse me, how do we generate the revenue and how do we keep people in their homes and how do we keep people fed? And these are the things that I'm concerned with. And if we revitalize our rural areas, as far as speaking of revitalizing, we have to make an emphasis on putting broadband across the South. There in the 21st century, there's no reason why if I can speak to somebody on the moon, I can't speak to somebody down here in Lowndes County just because of broadband internet. So we have to make those investments so that they actually can be competitive in this digital age. But we definitely will invest into our farmers and our farmlands to get those folks back to work.
Robert, you mentioned the black belt. I mean, that's like almost going to a third world country. Is there anything statewide we can do to help these people improve their standard of living?
We have to actually recognize that they are down there and they are part of this state because a lot of our investments do tend to go towards our bigger cities and our bigger counties. So when we look at, for example, when you look at education again, A lot of these rural counties don't even have certified teachers. They have basically just volunteers who are not even certified for a whole, sometimes for a whole year. So we have to have a leadership who sees the state as a whole, who understands that the strongest of the weakest link in your chain is what you have to really focus on if you want to remain strong. So if you're looking at the rural areas who have been shunned for so long through investments and opportunities of building up those areas, this is what we have to shift our focus to. Is making sure that we are realizing that these folks are hardworking folks down there. These are some of the most innovative people that I've ever met in my life, as far as, not supposed to look like that, but it works. I mean, they're innovators. So I think if we as a state would actually invest into these areas, i.e., again, starting off with broadband, and I would have within 2 years of us being of me being governor, we would actually have broadband, finish that job out so that these folks in these rural areas can actually compete, not just in this state, but as in the economy of the America as a whole. I mean, I think we're losing so many opportunities with not using that vast resource of untapped land that we can use to generate revenue.
Robert, about 47 years ago, roughly, Hurricane Frederick rolled right up Mobile Bay, and it absolutely devastated all the coastal communities, in Baldwin County.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, there was about 28,000 people lived full time in Baldwin County. Today, that's well over 200,000, and Baldwin is one of the fastest growing counties in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And with, if there is some truth to the global warming thing, we've got, a potential for sea rise in the coming decades. Is there a danger to all the sprawl that's appearing in Baldwin County, particularly below the I-10?
I would have to say probably so. So I'm one of those people that when it comes to climate change, let's address this. I I don't disagree with it. I think that there has been some miscalculations, some things, but I do think that Alabama being a coastal city, I mean a coastal state, we have to take that serious into account because our coastal cities will be the first ones to start to erode away once the sea levels do start to rise. So I do think that our southern cities they are more at jeopardy than a lot of people in leadership in Alabama wants to admit.
Robert, earlier you was talking about the border. Do you support what President Trump's doing with immigration and ICE?
I support immigration policies, but I don't support detaining the wrong people. But I understand that it's a complicated process. Sometimes you don't know who is legal, who is not illegal. But as far as ICE removing all illegal immigrants from this state, I mean from this country, I 100% support that notion. And brings me back to one of those things where we were talking about earlier, how we have this constant Democrat versus Republican, and I'm only tearing down your idea because it isn't mine. So if you look back to Obama, the Clintons, immigration was the Democratic Party's thing. They were on board with it too, but too many Republicans got onto that bandwagon. So now the Democrats have to shift away from it. It's a policy that Democrats and Republicans both know that we need because you can't just have everybody flood this country and snap up our resources. The more humane solution would be if you want to help them, it'll help them establish something in their countries to build up their countries even better. Now, I'm all about immigrants coming over here the legal way. I think there is a process to where you can come into this state legally. Just come through this state legally. And in my opinion, I may be wrong, but in my opinion, if you're sneaking over here legally, it's probably because you've done something that you know that you would not be able to get in this country for. And we need to be concerned about that.
Robert, last week, Governor Ivey issued a request for bonds um, in order to build the West Alabama highway from Mobile all the way to Russellville, four-laning Highway 43.
Hmm.
The Lieutenant Governor, Will Ainsworth, has called that the most reckless use of tax dollars um, imaginable because there's no federal dollar. We're not getting any federal dollars for, to match that. Where do you come down on that issue? Should we have done Highway 43 or should we have six-lane I-65?
I would have had to sit in the rooms with the developers, the economists, to actually go over the actual raw numbers of what the cost, the trade-off should be for both. But from my minute understanding of that, it would be 6 lane 65. Just for, well, I travel that road a lot too, but six lanes, just makes the traffic flow a lot easier. But I do agree with Will Ainsworth on that. That was kind of. mm, I'll leave that one there.
Robert, last session we had a bill that was passed where how was it, Brandon? If you're involved in if a police officer is involved in a shooting, they couldn't be sued. Is that right?
Yeah, that
My
is
understanding
the
that
new
is what it.
bill.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, do you think that that was really necessary? Because don't we already give police the benefit of the doubt here? I mean, did we really need to give them that extra layer of protection?
So I think that we should support our police officers. I think we should adhere to their lawful orders. But I think the police should be able to be sued. I don't think that you should have so much unchecked power to where you can just start doing whatever you want to do. Because, well, look, I can't be sued, so what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or because I mean, and this has kind of nothing to do with it, but on the same parallel plane, you have a lot of police officers that will get fired from this department, and then you go work in this department, but now you see the track records of you doing the same type of acts and this. So I think once you're fired from being a law enforcement officer, you shouldn't be able to be a law enforcement officer in another city, state, town, etc. That's just my opinion.
Robert, we've got a bill before the legislature that's probably, that passed the House, got stalled in the Senate last time. It's going to, has a pretty good chance of passing this time. Requiring the Ten Commandments to be placed on the wall somewhere of every schoolhouse in Alabama. If Robert, you were the governor, would you sign that legislation?
With some adjustments. I don't think that I believe in separation of church and state. I personally, I go to Sixth Avenue Baptist Church. I believe in Jesus, but I also believe in separation of church and state. So I wouldn't want to make it to where you are just required to repost them. But I do think we should definitely bring Jesus back into schools. I think we need that because whether or not you believe in Jesus or not, we have to admit that the characteristics of Jesus Christ are spot on. And if we all implemented those into our lives, it would make the world a little bit better. But when it comes to forcing your beliefs on someone, I don't agree with that. But I don't see why there should even be an issue for people to post the Ten Commandments in a school. I think from a societal standpoint, though those commandments are pretty spot on. That if you adhere to most of them, that society would actually be better. And I think instilling those types of things in the students and kids is not a bad thing. But I don't think that we should be forcing children to adopt to one religion or the other.
Robert, you possibly have to face Doug Jones, Tommy Tuberville, and Stacey George. What do you think is the quality that you have that differentiates you from them?
The thing that differentiates me from most of these candidates is that they won't have the same level of urgency that I have to address these economical issues because, in 30 years, I'll still be in my 60s. So if we don't make the adjustments that we need to now to create an economy that will be sustainable for my generation, they're not going to have the same urgency as I will. But what further separates me is that I'm the best of both worlds. And what I mean is this. Grew up in that last generation who understands the old world of rotary phones and going outside until the street lights come on. But I also was born as a millennial at the cusp of the technological revolutions. So I have the unique advantage of living in the old world and the new world. So I can bridge those two worlds together in a way that actually benefits all of Alabamians and not just a few, not the Democratic side of the aisle, not the Republican side of the aisle, but Alabama as a whole. That's what separates me from everybody else in this race because I can
Um,
relate to the older generation as well as the younger generations, and I fully understand what the older generations are talking about with traditions and some of the things that my generation have gotten away from. We have to get back to, but also understand the advancements from technology and how we can integrate those to actually facilitate some of those old traditions.
Last week, Senator Tuberville sort of created a little bit of a firestorm when he came out so harshly against the Islamic school that Hoover decided not to allow. I think he called it, said Islam was not a religion, it's a cult, and that, all of those people should be run out of the country or it's going to become a caliphate. Do you think his comments might have been a little insensitive and maybe
Yes,
put a bad light on Alabama?
yes. So I want to stand on the record. Islam is not a cult. I know several Muslims, and we may have a disagree on theology, but as far as a decent, good working person and people, they are that. So are there extremists in those in Islam? Absolutely. Are there extremists in Christianity and every other religion? Absolutely. But I don't think that you disparage a whole religion based off of your own opinion of those folks for political expedience, and that's all that was. He thinks that that's going to sell here in Alabama, so that's why he said it. And that's part of the problem with politics in this day and age is a lot of these folks who are running for office, they don't have a plan, they don't have a vision, they have polled questions that are talking points that polled well, so they just constantly say those and hope people will vote for them. We need somebody who actually has a plan to actually get something done, not just for my base or their base, but for the entire base of Alabama. And that's what I'm bringing to the table as the next governor of Alabama.
Along those same lines, Robert, Secretary of State Wes Allen's trying to get a bill pushed through to ban naturalized citizens from serving in government. What do you think about that?
It depends on what roles they are. And if so, let me say it like this. So if you're talking about someone who's, and I know who he's kind of thinking, who he's talking about, but I don't have a problem with you becoming an elected official because you came to this country, you became a U.S. citizen, you should have the rights to perform as a U.S. citizen. And part of those rights is to be able to run for public office. And I think that we have enough checks and balances in place to where even if someone was somehow an quote unquote spy for another country, uh, America is at a point to where we have enough safeguards to where you wouldn't be able to really just destroy our country. Now, obviously, um, we have to understand that and here's just my personal opinion. I don't think just because you're born in America that you'll love America more than somebody who wasn't if you become a citizen. So I'm not against you serving as an elected official, regardless of as long as you went through the proper channels to become a U.S. citizen. I recognize you as my neighbor. I recognize you as my countryman, and I support you as long as you make sense.
Robert, we've had you on for over 50 minutes. That's probably enough questions from Brandon. Is there something we haven't covered you'd like to, to add on the way out?
Yeah. So the thing that I want to add is that I know most of y'all don't know my name, but everybody knows who I am. I'm literally that guy that lives around the corner from you that takes the same highway as you to work every day that you just don't know. I'm the guy that's in the grocery store with you that you walk past without saying. The point that I'm making is this. The problems that I'm trying to fix are the problems that we all face together as everyday Alabamians. And the only way we're going to fix those problems is to put somebody in place who have actually faced these problems. Tommy Tuberville is a rich man who's been rich for too long to know what it's like to be at the bottom to fend for yourself. No disrespect to that candidate, no disrespect to Doug Jones or all these other folks. They don't live our lives to understand what adversely affects us enough to where they're not going to fix it as quick as I will because I live it. And let's be quite frank about it. Uh, I'm not here to be a career politician. So once I get in office, my 4 or 8 years, that's pretty much it. So we're going to make sure we maximize that time. And I don't have to be surreptitious in my approach with what bills I want to push and what bills I want, because I'm not worried about anybody primary and somebody against me for not going with their party. And that's what you're going to get with any candidate that comes out of the Democratic Party or comes out of the Republican Party. They're not going to be able to effectively govern because they're going to be too worried about, if I vote for this or vote for that, will I be primaried against? You can't primary somebody against me. I'm an independent. So it's not, I can make the decisions based off of what needs to be done in this moment, what will benefit the people in this moment, not will I lose my seat if I vote in favor of this or I vote against that. And that's what we need in Alabama. That's the leadership that we deserve. And that's the leadership that I'm going to bring, is a common sense approach to complex problems.
Robert, thanks for coming on. I'll get this loaded up to YouTube very shortly.
All right. Thank you, sir. And you guys have a great one.
You
You
too.
too,
Merry
and Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you all. Happy holidays.